So, mental health for the first time on the Global Non-Communicable Diseases agenda this September at the UN high-level meeting. How do you feel about it as advocates who've been in mental health for many years now?
I feel like it's an amazing opportunity that we definitely need to take advantage of. It's time for governments and UN member states to lead the change. It's very much needed to pay special attention to NCDs and mental health. An amazing time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, like many of us have been doing this advocacy work for a long time. Many of our ancestors and colleagues and elders before us have been doing this work for decades, centuries. So it's wonderful to finally have mental health be taken seriously and integrated into the NCD agenda, and for, marginal voices to finally be heard in that high-level context.
That's very true, especially in the UN context. We've been talking about sustainable development and sustainable development goals for quite a bit. And mental health is not very separate from a lot of them. When you talk gender, you talk equity, you talk climate action, education. Do you have any favorites of these sustainable development goals or any lingering themes that you like to talk about in the context of mental health?
That's a difficult one. I would say definitely education and climate change. I feel like it's very much needed to connect, as you say, the conversations around mental health to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I feel like this is something that is not very much often talked about. And yeah, I mean, how do climate events, climate disasters relate to mental distress, education as well, how we need to implement mental health policies and programs in schools.
Yeah, I think that social and structural and commercial determinants agenda is so important, which I think speaks to equity, the SDG goal around equity, and thinking about power and intersectionality and how a lot of inequality in society drives a lot of distress for people, and really thinking about how human rights can address that agenda, and how we can think about leading for those most impacted in communities. Yeah.
That's very true. In my research, I've been increasingly understanding mental health in a community context. And I've been learning, speaking to young people aged 18 to 30 about how even though people may not have a vocabulary for mental health, it is very much there in their bodies and minds, right? It could be in the form of emotional experiences like burnout or anxiety more as a broader term. But I feel like just coming from a linguistic background where English is not everybody's first language, or actually very few people's first language in India, I've been learning how language also forms experiences, and oftentimes you will not go around saying I have anxiety, but you may still have that experience. These have been some of my recent reflections within mental health. Is it the same in your countries?
Yes, definitely. I feel like language is still a huge part when we talk about mental health. It can, promote a stigma and discrimination in many ways. So it's very important how we talk about mental health, how we talk about people with lived mental health experience as well. This is something that is, at least in Peru, is also a reality that we are trying to change. And also, to promote the social participation of people with lived mental health experiences, to actually value their voices as well.
Yeah, I would just echo that around the kind of evolution of, again, a lot of our elders in terms of various social movements, whether people use language of consumer or patient or, survivor of the system, that language differs for different people. And of course, cultural and spiritual or religious determinants also shape the way that people might understand their experiences of wellbeing and mental health. And Australia is a very diverse and kind of cosmopolitan community as a society. And I think that there's a lot of divergence around how people view and understand their own explanatory frameworks in mental health. So I think language and linguistics are really important, and honouring people's lived expertise and how they've understood their mental health, I think, is what we're all really advocating for. Yeah.
That is so true. I would love to pick up on the diversity aspect of mental health. And in India, as far as I know, there's 1,200 ethnic groups, and a lot of them not recognized as well. And when we talk spirituality and religion is quite big in India, right? And oftentimes people will understand mental health as important to well-being through maybe spiritual practices, through yoga, which is really common worldwide now as a physical sport. But essentially in India, it's existed for many, many years, centuries rather, and yoga talks about mindfulness, right? So I feel like when we talk about community and lived experience, if we approach mental health from a lens of practices and spirituality or religious or even cultural that they already know of, there's a lot of like lived wisdom and great wisdom around mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that that's often an argument in global mental health is a lot of the approaches are very biomedical, very individualistic, often view our experiences of suffering or pain or, spirituality and revelation through an illness or disease model and framework rather than honouring that individuals, communities, families have viewed their livelihoods and experiences through the body, mind and soul in, many different ways. Yeah, I wonder if that's what it's like in your context.
Definitely, I very much agree. In Peru, we are a very, very diverse country. We have the coast, we have the Andean highlands, we have the Amazon rainforest, so we have many different cultures, many different languages as well, and the understanding of mental health can differ amongst cultures. So it's very important that mental health interventions take into account these different perspectives, these different views of the world, because sometimes mental health can be a very Western concept. So it is very much important to adapt mental health interventions so they are culturally appropriate as well.
Yeah, that's something we've also been discussing quite a bit this week about the diversity of lived experience and how it shows up in different cultures across different languages and vocabularies. And with regards to children and youth mental health, what do you think are good priorities for the next 5 to 10 years for countries to focus on?
Yeah, well, I think one for me, I think, is really around youth participation and involvement, and again, addressing issues such as knowledge and justice, where adults' knowledge is often privileged over children and young people's knowledge. In the academic space, we call that epistemic injustice, which occurs in the mental health system as well, where doctors and psychiatrists, their knowledge is privileged above our own and our own stories. So I'd really love to see more co-leadership and move from tokenism to co-leadership of young people involved in designing, those policy solutions to problems, because those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. What are your thoughts?
I would very much agree. I feel like one of the main topics should also be suicide prevention amongst youth and children. In my country, most people who die from suicide are people aged between 15 and 29 years of age. So it's very important to start promoting mental health in schools, promoting more people to, get to know about mental health, facing stigma, trying to tackle stigma, trying to tackle discrimination. Yeah.
Yeah, even in the Indian context, I've been researching climate anxiety and emotions in South Asia. So that includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and 4 more countries. And I've been noticing, like, when we talk about climate anxiety, in a Western sense, it's very valid. But in an Indian sense, sometimes there's like this discourse around, is it a luxury stressor because young people don't have time to sit down and think about heat or how, flooding is impacting them, or just even acknowledge climate anxiety as a term. And something I feel like should be talked about more often is like multiple stressors and polycrisis. Like, I feel like even the pandemic was something that we didn't fully move on from before we, started back into the normal world. And like this is something I'm recognizing from even conversations with friends and families about how just there's so much stress around so many things that when we talk mental health or we talk climate change or climate anxiety, these can feel like added topics to learn about rather than people realizing that they already have a lived experience, So in the larger scheme of things, if you could leave like with one line about mental health or lived experience or any of these themes that we've covered for other young people, any advice or like maybe a message to world leaders, what would that be? Like one most pressing line.
I would say it's urgent to, lead on mental health, especially to prioritize mental health policies, especially because mental health is connected to not only NCDs, but also so many aspects of sustainable development, economics, employment, poverty, climate, education. So I would say it is important to take, a holistic view of mental health rather than thinking it's only a matter of the health sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. It's a whole of society issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a social justice issue. And I would just say that I'd like to see member states value lived experience as lived expertise, in the same way that we value other forms of knowledge and expertise. As I've mentioned, often young people with lived experience often have the answers to a lot of the complex, wicked problems that we face in society. Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, I would say lived experience is so crucial, and one shouldn't shy away from sharing, even if they know very little or wherever they are in their journey, like to spread their story with their friends if they feel passionate about mental health and well-being. There shouldn't be the sense of, oh, I don't have a perfect English, so I can't talk about it. Like, there should be more and more encouragement of care circles and community level mental health dialogues. That's something I would push for.